Okay, Mr. Tong, thank you so much for connecting with us from the United States. I'll go right to the topic. We all know that AI is one of the technologies that will actually shape the future, in not a very distant future, I would say, right? And it will change maybe almost everything in our lives. You are specialized in education, so I would like to know, how do you think AI is going to change education? What role that AI can play in the education sector?
Yeah, so as you already talked about, so AI is going to change every aspect of our life because the power of automation and the power that a lot of the work that currently considered only human can do now can be in some way enhanced, or in some cases even replaced by AI. And we see that AI is going to have a similar impact in education, especially because traditionally, if you look at the education, it's a very human-centric enterprise. Because, well, I mean, you need a lot of interaction. Also, you need a lot of type of communication that is specific to, you need human knowledge. You need to have really good understanding of the communication, emotions, and other aspects of the student, in addition to understanding the knowledge they're trying to acquire. However, there's one thing that the traditional education cannot do. It's to do what we call personalized education at scale. When we're looking at education, the natural way of education actually is one-on-one, because when we are looking at how in our, when we are young, we get knowledge, we learn skills from our parents or the people who are around us, it's very, very interactive. And also it's very, very personalized. You don't have like 3 kids in the same room trying to learn, mommy or daddy at the same time, right? Because each one of the persons here, they have different ways of communication. They have different ways of their emotional state, and they have different need at any time when they're learning things, especially life skills and so forth. But because in the traditional way, when the industry revolution happens about 2 centuries ago, I think when it started in Prussia, where they need some way to instill knowledge that for industry, especially the skills that, for example, military or industry as a worker, or later as a clerk, you need to have a lot of people who learn these things together and quickly. And that came with the modern way of education, which is like you have a classroom, a teacher sit in front or stand in front and teach everybody the same thing. But that type of education actually is very inefficient and also unnatural. If you think about it, for every kid, even in a 30 student classroom, everybody have different pace. Everyone have different aptitude and preferences. And also everyone have different challenges and struggles when they're learning stuff. But the problem with the factory-based model, we call the factory-based model of today's classroom education, is that the teacher is at the center of the education space, and the pace is determined by the average, but not by individual need. And the interaction is minimal. It's mostly a broadcasting, and the teacher is broadcasting knowledge to the student and try to transfer to them. And the student is doing homework to get feedback later. And that feedback actually is not immediately available to the teacher to enable teaching. So the rich people or the privileged people, they typically hire tutors, right? So that's why you see the aristocrats or the people who are really getting good education typically have a lot of people around them. and then give them very specific instruction and help. That is not doable with the traditional model. In the new world, to do personalized education, because the cost is prohibitive, right? You need really good teachers, and you have to dedicate their attention to each individual student. But that can be done by AI. So think about these. In the past, like an Uber driver, used to be that we have to take buses, right? So we go to places, we take bus, we take train, because that is the economic way of doing transportation. But as the kind of like the advance of GPS and also advance now with auto driving and so forth, we see a future where the cost of personalized transportation is getting cheaper and cheaper because so much more is done by automation and by scaling up the whole, I serve you individually and help you to gain that efficiency through the automation part of it. So when we see in the future where the auto driving is available, and we're going to see that cost is going to even drop even further, so that it's going to approach the cost of bus or trains, which are like a mass transportation. And we see that is happening in education as well. The more part of the education can be achieved through automation and through AI diagnosis and AI recommendation and AI feedback, the easier that we're going to achieve the personalized education at scale. So that is going to be the really important advances. And we see that as a paradigm shift in the education world, which is using AI and help each student to achieve their potential by giving them what is the optimal at any time in real time, so that they will be like working with a personal tutor all the time, even though they still need the teachers in the classroom to guide them and also have the emotional type of exchange and having disciplinary type of encouragement or motivational stuff. But I think more and more, a lot of these teachers will be more like a head coach, and the AI will be like an assistant coach, where the AI will be doing all the manual works, kind of like the tedious work, right? For example, diagnose each question the student is answering, and then give specific feedback on each of the student assignment or task. And that will help the future, where you can see the efficiency in education are exponentially improved, and then we can achieve a really high quality education at the cost, the similar marginal cost, and actually even cheaper than the traditional classroom teaching. Because once AI is getting the data and knowledge of the teaching and learning aspect, that cost is going to be the cost of electricity. And you can do 10,000 students at the same time. And you can do even more, like if you look at like a Khan Academy or Coursera. Right now, they don't really have that much of AI of customized learning, but just by making the content available at a large scale, that already reduce the cost of higher ed education, especially those education like with community colleges or universities that doesn't have the top tier, professors or instructors. So.
You mentioned two key points: cost and tailoring education. This sounds very familiar because in China, I saw some of the programs that they have to take AI into medicine, and therefore making medical help more approachable for those remote areas where maybe there is no enough doctors, infrastructure is not really good. So are we going to see something similar with education? Is this education where you only need electricity, and maybe in China right now is 5G networks are almost everywhere? So is this also going to happen in education, that AI will help bring quality education to all the corners of the world?
Absolutely. And this is actually, I would say it should happen even before medicine, because medicine and healthcare is probably more higher stake than education, where you don't tolerate mistakes, or you don't tolerate the way, like for example, when you do surgery, or when you do even just prescribe a medicine, you actually need more control, or more, I would say, quality assurance. So, but in education is high stake, but typically, even you make certain mistakes, like make a recommendation, it wastes a little bit of time, but it's not life-threatening. So I think that is even easier for AI to be deployed. And another thing is about the data availability, because medicine is much more difficult to gain large quantity of data for each type of disease or medical conditions. So for train the AI model, which requires a lot of data, a lot of iterations, it's actually more difficult for the medical world than in education. Like in education, we collect millions of students' data, and then billions of data points, just like in a single semester. So to us, it's a lot easier to train the model to give good AI advice. And then what I think you see the real potential there. Because if you look at who need the personalized education and AI education the most, it's the people who are currently don't have even access to good teachers. Not only it's too costly for them, like in rural areas or in these less developed economic conditions, they just don't have any teacher. Not only good teacher, a lot of them, like if you look at if you go to the villages, I think in China, some of the villages, this same teacher is teaching math, Chinese to multiple grades of kids at the same time. They're in the same classroom. You see, for these kids, not only they're not different personally, but they are also not even the same age, right? So, they need really personalized, differentiated education. Just because, I need to learn like second grade math, and the other kid in the same room need to learn fourth grade math, right? And you put this together and doing the same thing, it just doesn't make sense. But that's the reality. But with AI and 5G, and also more, ubiquitous mobile access to data, and I think that is definitely not even a dream. We actually have deployed some of our solutions to the rural areas in China, where these are for charity purposes and also for experimental purposes. We have done that, from our own charity effort, and also we have done that with Stanford University recently. And Stanford actually run a 10,000 student big experiment in Sichuan, Ya'an County. And they have, like I said, they have 3 groups. One group using AI, one group using traditional learning technologies like learning management system, and a third group using just traditional classroom. And we're still tabulating the data right now, but it's a resounding success from even day one that the kids have great result from even like after a month. And this was, again, a 6 months project. So we're still tabulating the data and run all the different type of analysis on that. But we see that it's going to happen. And then we see that as a real savior for the kids who are left behind and who are really struggling because of the lack of human attention and quality teaching resources.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's the result of that experiment, which I think is very, very interesting. And I do think that all these AI developments are fascinating, but also a little bit scary, let's face it. So many people are worried about their jobs. You mentioned autonomous driving. In Shanghai, taxi drivers were asking me when I was coming out of of using an autonomous taxi if they were going to lose their jobs. In teaching, you mentioned before, people are key, have been key for education. Are they going to lose their jobs? How can they stay relevant and keep their jobs in this situation?
Yes, so we see that happening in any of the industrial revolution, that the 4 revolutions we had in the past. And that is already happening. As you can see, is that a lot of the accountants, a lot of the insurance agent, a lot of the more manual, working like even receptionists are losing their jobs because a lot of these things are automated for them. And the AI is taking over, like, for example, just receiving phone calls, right? So you typically, when you go into call your United Airlines or anyone, that you first receive is a robotic voice, and that they're going to tell you what you want and so on, and route you, if necessary, to a human, recipient of the phone call. And that is going to happen no matter what, because that's the way technology advances. And in the past, this is similar to when the horsemen or the people who were the cart coaches, the person who drives
the wagons,
yes. And that the horse, they take care of the horses. They basically take care of the transportation need using traditional way. And they are replaced when people get personal cars, right? These people lose their jobs, and that's what happened, because now everybody, once they can drive themselves, they don't typically need somebody who have the skills or the need to take a cart or wagon. So what I'm seeing though is that as things disappearing and the need also changes, and created a lot more opportunities. Because if you think about it, even the AI can take care of 95% of the education need for the kids. There are still very important human touch that is needed. Like we said, we need head coaches. In the past, it's not because it's not needed. It's because the teacher who didn't have time to take care of this individual need and having the attention for each and every kid. They typically have maybe a little bit of time for the really good kid, or maybe 1 or 2 of the really kind of like a slow kid. And that's pretty much it from their time perspective. But now if AI take over the manual part of it, I see the teacher actually are more needed than before. And also they need new skills. They need to be able to work with AI in a very productive way. They need to be able to understand what the statistics, what are the AI recommendations means. And also they can help to explain and enhance AI in corner situations that are not mainstream. Because as AI is learning, you see that immediately they learn the basic stuff, right? Like the thing that can be repeated again and again. But for each case, there are still corner things that AI just miss, or they need further human instruction or supervision. We have this paradigm called human in the loop. It's actually very important that we keep human in the loop in the AI revolution. It's not that we're replacing teacher, it's that we're reducing the unnecessary, tedious, and boring workload that they need to deal with today, and giving them more innovation space, giving them more time to connect emotionally and also even morally with the student, so that they can be the driving force behind a lot of the AIs in both of, we call that continuous learning and continuous improvement for both AI and the human. And that you can see that for doctors. I don't know whether you've ever heard of the machine called Da Vinci, which is it's a surgery robot, right? with the advance of that, which means that the robot can do a lot of the very kind of like a high precision surgeries with a human, some help, but also with a lot of automation, a lot of the kind of like the monitoring and so on. You see that because of that capability is available now, there is a higher demand for surgeons, not a reduced amount of surgeons, because now a lot of things that it was not possible before becomes possible. And then you don't need, you need more doctors, and the doctors can take shorter time to become really, really good at delivering high quality medical services. And I see the same thing happening, is that you will see these super teachers that are really enhanced by the AI and doing things that was not possible, like individualized diagnosis, individualized attention with a lot of the AI automation. And they can be so much more powerful and then be able to delivering things that at the cost that is still reasonable or in line with the current education cost. In this case, you're basically saying, I'm doing only 1/10 of the work in the past, but probably still reap the same revenue or benefit at a large scale as before, and even more because now you're providing much higher quality services and the attention that only in the past the rich people can afford.
Okay, Mr. Tong, thank you so much for connecting with us. We are now at all the sides of the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. So wish you the best with all those experiments and looking forward to really seeing the results. Have a very good day.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Zígor.
Bye-bye.
Bye.